Just then, he realized he was in his spiritual sea. He was confused as to how he was there. He was not sure how he was going to explain this to Dong'er, and he was certain that he had also offended Chiu'er. He didn't know how he was even going to explain it to everyone else if he needed to hide what had really happened. A spirit called out to him, asking what he had done wrong, and why he looked so sad about it. Yu Hao recognized the tone. It was Brother Daydream. He had finally woken up from his deep sleep. Yu Hao ran over to hug him, and Daydream told him that he hadn't died, wondering why he was crying so much. Yu Hao asked him if he was really crying. He also inquired if Elder Ye Lai KC was gone. Brother Daydream told him that it was all right. The elder was a respectable and great human being, but he hadn't expected him to sacrifice himself to save Yu Hao when things got rough. Yu Hao asked him if he had completely recovered. His aura didn't seem to feel the same as it was before. Daydream shifted into his human form and told him he was fine. In fact, after the elder had passed away, the Ice Empress and he had undergone an evolution. Yu Hao was confused hearing that. Daydream wondered why he was so slow. He explained that their spirit soul had changed back. The seal that had been placed on them for becoming his spirit rings had been lifted. The difference was that at that time they couldn't use their full power, but now they could. Yu Hao asked him if this meant that he was going to become like the Snow Empress, and if he could also come and fight with him in a battle whenever he called him. Daydream reminded him that he wasn't good at fighting, but he assured him that he could give him more abilities now that his power was back. It would also feel good to go out from time to get some fresh air. He asked him if he had forgotten that Daydream hadn't been able to go outside in years. He told him to hurry up and absorb them into his real soul rings so that he could go out and finally be free. Yu Hao was taken aback. He asked him if absorbing took him his spirit energy. Daydream wondered why he had to choose a dumb idiot like him to be his host. He pointed out that they had fulfilled the promise they had made at their end, and now the seal was lifted, so he had to hurry up and absorb them in order to make them their true spirit ring. This way he could finally go out and see what the world had become. Yu Hao activated his spirit rings around Daydream, and a bright purple light started shining. Night had fallen, and Yu Hao was back in his room. He saw the empty chair next to him and wondered where Dong'er had gone. He called out to Brother Daydream, asking him where he was. None of them seemed to be there, and he wondered if he was still dreaming. He heard a faint sound calling out to him, saying that Yu Hao couldn't find him. It seemed like this wasn't a dream after all. He reminded Daydream that he still had his spiritual detection skills, so he could hear him. Daydream finally decided to come out, and Yu Hao noticed he had been hiding inside his sleeves. He admitted he had almost stomped on him. Daydream started laughing, saying that he didn't have to worry about him since he couldn't be crushed so easily. Yu Hao noticed how small he was, but even then his life energy seemed really powerful. He absolutely adored this cute form of his. Daydream told him that the main point of it was that he didn't need to keep depending on him to refill his life force anymore. But there was still one more thing. If he were to die, then everything would be over for Daydream as well. He told Yu Hao to release his soul ring so he could see them. Yu Hao did as he was told, and Daydream was impressed. He showed him his own soul ring as well, saying it was really amazing. It had the ability and the strength of a million-year-old soul beast hidden within it. Yu Hao took a look at his soul rings and was amazed. He noticed that his own soul ring had transformed into a shield. Brother Daydream explained that it was known as the Reflection Shield of Life. The shield's power came from Daydream's vitality, along with Yu Hao's spiritual sea. He informed him that it had the ability to reflect both physical and spiritual attacks. It could withstand any and all attacks as long as Daydream's vitality was able to withstand it. Yu Hao was glad to hear all of that, saying that it was overpowered. Everything seemed awesome except for the name, which sounded a little lame. Brother Daydream thought he was cruel, asking him how he could say that, even though he knew that it was a personification of all of his brother's powers. He told him he was angry, and that he was going to go to sleep now. Just then, he sensed something and pointed towards Yu Hao's hand. He told him it was something dangerous. There was a ring on his hand which materialized into a bag. Daydream told him that something dangerous was sealed within it and that he would open it and check it for him. Yu Hao recalled it being the bag that Uncle Niu Tian had given to him when he had gone to visit Dong'er's home. Brother Daydream's words took him by surprise. Moreover, he was even saying that he could undo the seal. He wondered if that was even possible with the amount of spiritual power he had. It seemed as if Daydream had read his thoughts. He asked him if he was thinking that they wouldn't be able to open it due to his low number of spiritual powers. Daydream told him he was totally wrong, since it required control over one's spiritual power to open it, and the actual amount did not matter. He told him to watch carefully as he undid the seal. The two of them began activating their spiritual powers, and slowly, Yu Hao noticed that the spiritual energy from the bag was getting compressed. Spiritual beams were being fired into it. It looked like a conflux of spiritual power was breaking the strongest seal in the world. Suddenly the bag rose into the air. He pointed out that Daydream had managed to open the seal but wondered why his spiritual power was now getting weaker. Daydream assured him not to worry about it since it must have been because he was using it after such a long time. The sun had risen, and it was morning already. Yu Hao had finally recovered his spiritual energy, but the only thoughts that were coming to his mind right now were those of Dong'er and Qiu'er. He didn't know how he was going to explain himself when he saw either of them. He figured he should just forget it and tell all of them the plain truth. A man had to know how to face his problems, and so he decided he would explain and apologize to both of them. He knew he might escape if he simply lied, but it was not going to last forever. It would be brought to light sooner or later. In conclusion, he was the one who was at fault, not any of them. But if Dong'er still got angry, then it would be a big problem for him. Just then, his hand accidentally touched the bag and he remembered he had to open it. He figured he should open it and see what was inside. He had been curious about it for a very long time. He pulled out a piece of paper and began reading it. He soon realized something and thought it was impossible. Someone had written him a letter, and it started off by addressing him, saying that if he was reading the letter right now, then he was sure he had already surpassed the power that was required to open it. The person in question had actually been thinking about whether it would be a mistake to tell him this or not, but he thought he didn't have any other choice. When Dong'er had brought him to her home, he realized that she had finally gained someone who she could trust. So now he had to tell him everything related to her for the sake of both his future and happiness. Dong'er hadn't been completely fine ever since she was a kid. She had had a very weak body constitution. But when she became 3 years old, she suddenly awakened 2 martial souls. This would go on to create a tremendous burden on her weak body. Whenever she tried to use her strength, a trident-shaped pattern would appear on her forehead. It had been placed on her body by her father to keep her away from that strange disease that had caused her body to weaken. That seal, placed by her father now, could at most suppress the disease from attacking her again until her 20th birthday. If the strange disease in her body wasn't cured before that, then it could never be cured in her lifetime. If the disease attacked her one more time, he was afraid that she could even lose her life. He further informed him that her father had been looking for a cure for her for a very long time, and after a long search, he had finally found an immortal herb that could cure her disease. He had tried various ways to find and get that herb, but he failed every time. The restriction for getting the herb had been very strange and unique, and the condition was that the person who came to pluck it had to be the one who had Dong'er as the only woman he loved. Even if he had a bit of anyone else in his heart, or if he tried to take out the herb by any other means, it would simply burn and become useless. The name of this immortal herb that could cure her disease was known as the heart-yearning flower. As her uncle, he was requesting him to pluck the herb in order to treat her. This was for the sake of both his future and happiness. The reason he had placed a seal on the back was because he was afraid that he wouldn't have the strength to withstand the dangerous environment that the herb was in. There was also another reason. Dong'er herself didn't know that she had this strange disease. He addressed him by name, begging him to not tell Dong'er whatever he had told him right now, or at least not until he had picked up the herb. If he, by any chance, failed to get it, he just hoped that Dong'er could at least have that smile of hers on her face until her last moments. He had also attached a map of where the immortal herb was located and warned him to be extremely careful as the place was dangerous. Yu Hao gritted his teeth. He was going to do whatever it took to save her. He had to first get to the place that had been marked on the map. There was an ancient book hidden there, and it had a record of an enormous number of medicinal herbs and how one was supposed to treat their ailments. The final thing her uncle wanted to say was that he should not take the risk if he really couldn't do it. The Sunset Forest was an extremely dangerous forest and a wicked place. Even the plants that grew there had evolved into the plant variety soul beasts. Yu Hao immediately set off. He prayed Dong'er wouldn't get worried about him. He was going to get his hands on that immortal herb and bring it back to heal her no matter what he had to do. Someone noticed him dashing off. It was Qiu'er, and she had never seen him so panicked like that before. He hoped Dong'er would just be patient and wait for him. He was definitely going to return with the immortal herb in his hand instead of being empty-handed. Just then, someone stopped him right there. Yu Hao was happy to see Qiu'er, but she asked him how he still had the nerve to call her by her first name after what he had done to her yesterday. Yu Hao told her he was really sorry about yesterday and that he really hadn't meant to do that. He asked her if she could move since he had a really urgent thing to do right now. He also stated that he would accept whatever punishment she gave him when he came back. She refused to listen to him. Yu Hao was very serious. He explained that he was in a hurry right now and asked her not to cause problems for him. She told him not to try and escape by making such excuses. She wanted to hear an explanation for what had happened yesterday. Out of nowhere, Yu Hao began yelling at her, asking her if she was deaf. He questioned if she could understand what he was saying to her. Qiu'er was taken aback and wondered what had happened. He had never been this aggressive before. He told her whatever he was going to do had nothing to do with her. She insisted that she was not going to allow him to leave if he didn't at least explain. He clenched his fist and in a firm tone told her not to test his patience. Everyone had a limit, and she was making him behave rudely towards her. She felt like he was insinuating a fight and asked him if he was sure he could win against her. The air around the two of them grew tense. Yu Hao figured he had no choice but to tell her, and he asked her to listen. He began by saying that he had a friend who was seriously injured right now, and he was going to look for a medicinal herb that could heal her. He asked her if she understood now, explaining that she could die at any time, so he had to hurry up and find it. He once again shouted at her, pleading her not to stand in his way and to get away from him. She asked them if the place he was going to was dangerous. He told her to just not block the way and not to try and stop him. He had to get that herb, even if he had to exchange his life for it. She told him not to get it wrong since she was not trying to actually stop him. Instead, she wanted him to let her come with him since he had said it was dangerous. One more person could always be helpful according to her. Yu Hao took a moment to think about it and asked if she really wanted to come with him. He had one condition for her. He would only allow it if she didn't get in his way. Her face lit up hearing this. The two of them began flying towards their destination. Chor told him he was flying too fast and asked him to wait for her for a bit. She had never tried flying like this before and didn't even know how it worked. She asked him if this was what he called a soul guide. It seemed very interesting to her, and it had been enjoyable to fly in the sky at high speeds so far. Yu Hao didn't seem to care about her small talk at all. He informed her that the place they needed to go now was in the Heaven Dao Empire. It was known as the Sunset Forest and was 2 times larger and more dangerous than the Stardew Forest. She hesitantly asked him if he didn't need to at least rest for a bit. He handed her a small jar, telling her that there was some soul power stored inside. If she were to inject a little bit of her own soul power, the stored one would start to slowly come out, and she could use it to replace her soul power consumption. She was amazed to hear that such a small thing could provide soul power. She remarked how he had really done a remarkable job in soul guides. He replied to her by saying that he had seen pigs before, but he had never thought that one would be this dumb. He expressed that she really didn't seem to know anything. She retorted, saying that she was also seeing a pig fly, though she had never seen one do anything like that. Yu Hao was annoyed, but she simply changed the topic, asking him who he was trying to save. Yu Hao instantly went silent.